With the work you guys have done and the expertise you've developed in balls in particular, as well as the background of the company and what you do and everybody else there, when the ruling bodies were doing their study on golf balls, it's kind of died down the discussion on this because it's they made their announcement, now everyone's kind of waiting for it to be invoked. But did they reach out to you guys at all to get your input on any of what you were seeing? And obviously they had to know that you guys were doing this work and it's like not like everybody's doing it. You guys are one of the only ones that I know, or are the only ones that I know that have done something like that. So I would have to imagine that if that they would reach out to you just because of what company you're with, who you guys are, the work that you're doing, et cetera. Was there ever anyone that contacted you or Marty or anybody at Ping and asked questions?
I know that we had an official statement as a company, but I don't think that we were consulted ever. But it is definitely going to be. We've had our own like theories of what do we think is manufacturers are going to change to hit these new conformance rules. Basically, you have to cut off 25, 30 yards of distance on a high speed drive. It's like how do we think golf ball manufacturers are going to go about this? And we have our own thoughts on how to do it. But yeah, it'll very much change. Basically, the two avenues that we think will probably be are either changing someone's ball speed or changing the lift and drag. And so probably some combination of the two would make sense. But it'll be very interesting. Both have disproportionate effects on faster speed players. So the guys who are 180 plus ball speed are going to see that full 30 yard plus loss in distance, and the guys who are more recreational with 120 mile per hour ball speed might see 10 yards or less. But it changes kind of our whole. We're actually actively working on like what do we think our loft should be on our iron sets? How do we think we should change our lofts on metal woods? Trying to prep for that work because it's coming up kind of pretty soon in our engineering timelines.
In your opinion, do you see any relevance? And I don't want to get if you think you might get in trouble by answering this, by all means, you can say no comment. But do you think what they're doing? If someone gave you the keys of the kingdom and said, "Chris, we're going to let you be the ruling body in golf," I have seen or can see somewhat of arguments from both sides, like with what they're able to do with ball technology is, as you said, just the flight it can have the same launch characteristics and everything, but the peak height is lower and the trajectory is lower, or they can do this, but they can dial in balls to a certain individual, which is a good thing, obviously, if you're playing, but it's, I can see the other side of the argument it seems to be that they're making some classic courses like a Marion obsolete. Where a lot of these old courses, these classic courses, and maybe this is just a lot of people say, well, that's just the old courses where we can move on to newer courses. But yeah, but golf's a traditional game. It's built around tradition. You don't want to just toss somebody to the side that has had such an impact on the history of the game. Because a lot of these courses in these older cities or bigger older cities are landlocked. They can't be buying up land. No one has, not as many people have the money that Augusta National does, where they can just keep buying, and they're getting to a point, I think, that they're not going to be able to stretch some holes out much longer. So there are valid points on both sides, but as somebody who deals in the ball space and tests and probably knows as much about them as the people that are making them, and somebody who's in the game, do you tend to fall one way or the other on what you think? Like I said, if somebody gave you the keys of the kingdom, would you have a preference on what was done?
Yeah, I think I'm slightly in favor of it. I think the demands for the amount of the length of courses, it seems to only be going up, and I think we're only seeing faster and faster guys. Even the funny thing for us is in our Ping player testing database, we can see how fast people's driver ball speed are over the years. And I know when I got to Ping, and that was only 8 years ago, I was like, I could get over 170 mile an hour ball speed, and that was like, oh wow, you got some speed. Mm-hmm. And now we've got guys who are over 180 mile an hour ball speed, and they're reaching 185, and it's like, now that I'm maybe on 175 ball speed, and it's like people barely batting the eye. Oh, that's like average for our fast player test pool. And so I think it's only going to get faster. We got college guys who seem to be pretty easily hitting 185, 190 ball speed, and so at that speed, it's like the physics are the ball's going to carry 330 in the air, and it's going to roll up to 350 if they try to make a course firm and fast. That ball's going like 370, and you need a 550-yard par four to make it a bit of a challenge. And so from that perspective, it's like if you want courses to not just get 7,500, 8,000 yards long, I think rolling the ball back does make sense.
I was looking at. I've got a book here on the shelf. Here it is, actually, right here, sitting next to me. The Story of Augusta National Golf Club. It goes back to the original. I found this in a resale shop in Charlotte when I was playing in a mini tour event there one year. But I was looking at when there was a lot of noise about Oakmont at was it the sixth hole being 290, 305 or 310 yards. There was a lot of noise about that it's too long, it's too this, it's too that. And I was looking at that book, and I think it was number 4 at Augusta, the par 3. The original length was 220-ish yards, right around there, 220, 230. And if you do a comparison of the golf ball from the 30s till today and how far things go and how high they go and everything else, it's like, well, that's kind of an apples to apples comparison there. And not that I've was around to hear anybody complain back then, but you don't really read about anything or hear stories about people complaining about how hard number 4 was at Augusta. But here they are with the modern technology and the modern everything else, manicuring it where you can roll it up. It's not obviously Oakmont has the famous greens, but number 4 at Augusta, for anybody that's ever been there, you've seen it on TV. He's got this rolling, front to back or kidney shaped green around the bunker. And I just find it interesting that you have a hole like that played that long in those days, and then you have a hole like this, and not everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but you have a lot of noise about, oh, this is too hard, it's too long, it's too this, it's too that. When, as you said, some of these players are hitting out there almost all of them are 300 plus, some of them are 350, and if you're not, you're going to be struggling to keep your card.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to approach it. Like, it is pretty cool that Brian Campbell has won twice on tour, and he's barely cracking 160 ball speed. Yes. So, like, it is. I don't think golf is broken. I think it's still very entertaining. You can have guys who are slow ball speeds competing with the guys who are fast balls. But that playoff between, I'm gonna mess up his last name, Pot Geider and Campbell, forget like what event that was, but it was the fastest versus slowest guy on tour.
Yeah, you got the fastest guy and the slowest guy, and they win back-to-back weeks.
Like, that's amazing. That golf can still support that disparity. You can still have Brian Longer making cuts at the Masters when it's over 60 years old. So golf is definitely not broken. I also don't think it's a problem that people are shooting 20 under at challenging courses. Like, that's just very impressive golf. I think Scotty Scheffler was talking about the Travelers, and the winning score had been around 20 under a lot of the previous events. And it's like, well, we're really good. And if you put a regular golfer on this course, they're still going to struggle. This course is still a very demanding track. And so that's the tough part too, is that golf's not easy. Like, you don't really want to make it harder for the recreational person who's trying to get into the game. And so that's where there's probably a whole separate discussion of what should be the right thing to do on the amateur side of things. You kind of want to make golf as easy, as inviting as possible. So yeah, it's always going to be a complicated one.
What do you see with the ladies tour? Do they have, because no one's complaining that they're hitting it too long. So let's, if we could speak to something that, not that anyone is closer to them as far as talent level, because they're eons above your scratch golfer +2. But what do you see from the women's front? Because as I was watching the last major they had, I don't remember which announcer it was Laura Barr or somebody was on there saying how if you did the calculations and compared the length of the golf course they were playing to the length of the men's were actually playing average 300 to 400 yards shorter than they should, or the ladies were playing 300 to 400 yards longer. So are the ladies hitting it longer as well, or does that seem to be a guy thing, or on the men's tour where they're developing the skill of extra speed?
Yeah, I'm not sure the trends as clearly on the LPGA tour, but I know that the areas they care about are different when we're designing clubs for the female LPGA tour. Like when we're thinking about hybrid development, the people that we consult the most are the LPGA tour players. That's a very common club for them, 4 hybrid, 5 hybrid, kind of bridging the gap to their fairway woods. Another thing that we've looked at a lot is kind of interesting. anecdote on our end is that we I was worked pretty closely with our now design engineering manager Travis Millman, who came up with the G430 fairway woods, and he worked on a max head and LST head, and he was trying to figure out the trade off between CG and MOI. Um, and we and some of the research that I looked at said that if he could lower the CG on the LST head, he would get more performance. He would carry the ball 5 yards further, and you wouldn't see much of a sacrifice in offline if you made the bulger roll as optimal as you could. Um, and we tested it out. It performed really well in our player testing. LST looked like a great option for players who kind of wanted that maximum distance out of their 3-wood. And we rolled it out to the PGA Tour, and it hasn't really been adopted very much. The max is our dominant model on the PGA Tour, but then on the LPGA Tour, people are using LST fairwood far more often. And our current kind of hypothesis is that, like, the LPGA Tour players preferred the extra height that you get from that lower CG on that LST, and so their priorities on a golf course are different. Like they maybe struggle to hold some of the greens. I think at the most recent PGA Frisco, I think that was the PGA Championship.
That's where it was. Yeah,
they were struggling to hold a lot of these greens. It's like stopping power, height, super important in the women's game. Getting the LST that might get you an extra 10 feet of peak height is super valuable. But the tour guys, PGA Tour guys, don't struggle with speed, getting the hike and the ball up in the air. And so they prefer that forgiveness, maybe a little bit lower, spinnier flight of the max. And so I think it kind of tells a different story of like what is the most important for those different golfers. I think like wind, we've done a lot of work on wind point and studying the effects of wind on ball flight, and we're kind of hoping to make that a new product that we roll out for Ballnamic. But we've given it to a lot of our tour players. Marty's used a lot in his own competitions. Like, what does wind do to ball flight? And I think we actually had a coach camp presentation on the effects of wind for PGA versus LPGA Tour golfers. And it's like 2 to 1. Like a 10-mile-per-hour headwind for a tour player on a 7-iron is going to hurt your distance by 20 yards, and it's only 10 yards for an LPGA Tour golfer. So the priority of what they're focusing on is much less wind dependent and way more getting peak height and getting stopping power. And the tour guys are like, how do we get as much control as possible? How do we play in the wind? How do we get a ball flight that we can predict? So yeah, it was a bit of a tangent of an answer, but it's a fun for us on the engineering side trying to solve these different problems for different skills and different speeds.